these are in full force today. Today is Saturday. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not sure what they're calling those. I call them aerators. That's what I would call them in my pond. You can see the water coming out. I think they're calling them agitators. Let me go take a look.
I like the sign. It's sat there ever since this happened, and I like that the city doesn't make people remove it. But here are what I call aerators. They're in full force here. I've had to turn the sound down. I've had to edit this video because you can barely hear each other talk if you were having a conversation here. Those of you that are not from here are not going to believe what I'm going to tell you. This is the entrance to our park. It is still open. You can see people walking. There was somebody riding a bicycle. There are so many aerators here now, and I will explain why in a moment. But early on, when this derailment happened, some were advising not to take showers, but if you wanted to wash, take a quick bath or sponge off. Because taking a shower aerates the chemicals in the water, and if you potentially had any chemicals in your water, it would make it easier for them to damage your lungs because you would be breathing them in. What do these look like, people? These are basically big shower heads. If there are chemicals in the water, they're going to be placed back into the air, although the EPA denies this. As I walked along this creek, what do you notice? What is missing here? What is missing is the air quality test monitors. If I were running this site, there would be an air quality tester every 10 or 15 feet, or at least near every single one of these clusters of aerators. If you were in high school creating a project, you would probably think of putting air quality monitors at this site, at least several of them. Or if you didn't think about it, if you had a team working on your project, somebody would mention it. The people that work for the EPA in Norfolk Southern are not stupid. Somebody had to think of putting air quality monitors here. But as far as I can tell, they are absent. As you will see, I spent probably 20 minutes filming. You will not see the full film, but you will see most of it. In that entire time and my walk through what I'm going to show you, I had not seen one air quality monitor. Why is that? What you are looking at right now is Leslie Run. Feeding into it from the entrance to the park is Sulphur Run. Sulphur Run is what you're looking at right now with the rocks blocking it off or damming it up. Why are there aerators and soil agitators up the creek on Leslie Run when they said there was no contamination that high? The railroad was ordered to pull up the tracks that they repaired and dig underneath to remove toxic soil and liquid. Keep in mind that Sulphur Run is parallel to the tracks further uptown. Are they now releasing so many chemicals into Sulphur Run that where Sulphur Run meets Leslie Run, is there a chance of contamination going upstream even with the current? If there were not, these agitators and aerators would not be upstream because they claimed prior that there was no contamination upstream into Leslie Run. The area that we are looking at right now is Leslie Run downstream from where Sulphur Run flows into it. And you can see all these aerators, a couple of different styles, running through Leslie Run. You can see there are homes right along this creek. I pray that Norfolk Southern and the EPA has demanded that these people leave. I still see no air monitors anywhere. These machines are so loud, I had to turn the sound on the actual original video down to 15%, meaning I have reduced the sound on the original video by 85%. It would be hard to hold a conversation without yelling next to these machines. If these people are indeed home, I first worry about their safety because of the chemicals being put into the air. Secondly, I have no idea how they get any sleep because these machines run 24/7. The park didn't always look like this. It just looked like this a couple weeks ago when Norfolk Southern started digging up under the tracks that they've been running their trains through for the last 5 weeks. Originally, Norfolk Southern did no cleanup at all. 5 minutes after the evacuation was lifted, trains started barreling through. That is because while we were huddled in our hotels or evacuated, watching television, waiting for the latest press conference to see what was going on, Norfolk Southern's main objective was to repair the broken track, and they laid track over contaminated liquid and soil. And as soon as the evacuation order was lifted, their main goal was to get trains rolling through again. Now that they are digging up the tracks ordered by the EPA to do so, I assume they are releasing more chemicals as they are doing that. Remember again, upstream, Sulphur Run runs parallel to the tracks. I assume more chemicals are flowing into Sulphur Run and going downstream into Leslie. If not, why the change? Why so many aerators? The entire first month, there were a few aerators in this creek, the kind that look like shower heads. But now, there are probably 10 times that amount. If everything is so safe, then why the massive change in the amount of aerators since they started digging up the tracks? A few weeks ago, Carnegie Mellon University teamed up with Texas A&M. They brought a van into town that measures air quality. In certain parts of town, they found high amounts of acrolein in the air, a highly toxic chemical. I wonder what acrolein levels would measure right here. We will never know, because as you can see, I still see no evidence of any air monitors on this site. I would believe that even the most uneducated project manager would have air monitors at this site. That is, if his boss allowed it. Even breathing in small amounts of acrolein in a vapor form is highly toxic to humans. It can cause eye and skin irritation, respiratory inflammation, and damage to your lungs for up to 18 months after exposure. You may not feel it at first, but there is also a known delayed respiratory response, where you will not feel the damage to your lungs until later. Is this why, if you watch my earlier interviews on national news, the first few interviews I was bragging that I felt exactly the same as I did before the accident? My main thoughts were, it wasn't important whether people had symptoms or no symptoms. I was concerned with the long-term health effects of what we could not see, the chemicals that may be in our air, water, and land. So even if you had no symptoms, that was irrelevant. That all changed after I started filming in Leslie Run by my house. The first time I filmed was without a respirator. I have had approximately 3 headaches in my entire life. I had a pounding headache for 2 days following that first initial filming. Like many of my videos, this one was not planned. It was spontaneous on a Saturday afternoon while driving through town after work and seeing the big change in the amount of aerators here. I had no respirator filming this video. And shortly after this video, with no respirator, I have suffered breathing problems, severe burning of the throat, diarrhea, headaches, swelling of the lips, swollen hands and feet, brain fog, and severe fatigue. You may remember also, a few days after filming this, my boots filled with water in Leslie Run, creating skin contact with my feet. My mother was a little woman of French, Hungarian, and Polish descent, while my father was full-blooded Chinese. In the 70s, when I was growing up, we were not wealthy, but every once in a while, we would get a treat by going to a Chinese restaurant. I could not eat that food without getting severe headaches, even as a child. I could not sleep after eating it, and it made me very jittery. My brothers would make fun of me because they said I was a sissy. It is not until they grew older that they could not tolerate MSG as well. My mother was very chemical sensitive, and I had got some of that from her. Some of us are more chemical sensitive than others. Maybe someone could stand by these aerators all day long and it not bother them. As you see in recent reports, many workers hired by the railroad have become ill. Are the children and adults of East Palestine that are more chemical sensitive like I am the canaries in the coal mine for all the other citizens? What are we going to find out later was in our air, land, and soil that they are not telling us now? And many of the townspeople are angry with people bringing these things to light. Here we can see a video I shot from a couple of weeks ago, where there are not nearly the amount of aerators at the entrance to the park. And you can see these people working. The person on the left on the bank has a mask covering his face. The other two do not, and they are directly in the water. Are they putting their lives and future health at risk? This is me, someone shot on Super 8 film in the 1970s. I am approximately 18 years old here. I've always taken good care of myself. I've been very athletic my entire life. As a kid, I rarely ate school lunches. I would pack my own food. I made my own yogurt. I took my vitamins. I trained every day, and I do so to this day. We are very careful to keep toxins out of our home, and we use only natural cleaners. It is devastating to be hit with this chemical bomb in the creek by our home, in the air, and in the land. We did not ask for this. We do not want it. And the cleanup at best is marginal, and I believe the way they are cleaning is actually harmful to us, both with the aerators and the mounds of toxic dirt that are piled like mountains, just seeping into the ground, not being accepted by other states. What you are looking at is recent video shot by me of the creek by my home. What you will be seeing next is a press conference held by our Senator J.D. Vance. My wife and I crashed the press conference, which was supposed to be for citizens asking questions and the press. However, it was very little publicized, and it was hard to find out where he was in our town. Many residents, including myself, called the municipal building early in the morning to find out where he would be, but none of us got a return call. We drove around until we saw news vans, and we went into the building. My wife and I were the only residents there. Here are some questions we asked.
So still, when I go in our creek 2 miles down, the chemicals that are lipid soluble are
Yep.
sitting on the bottom of the creek. So we're worried about some rain on this dirt here,
Yep.
but there's 24/7 water on top of these chemicals.
Sure.
And I can still pick up the rocks and chemicals just boil right up.
Yeah.
So what can be done?
Well, look, I mean, we clearly still have a lot of cleanup that needs to happen. And unfortunately, so long as you have the toxic dirt just sitting out there, it's going to continue to leach into the soil and it's going to continue to cause problems. Now, of course, you have the waterways that have already been contaminated. My understanding is that there are aggressive cleanup efforts underway, but it's going to take some time and it's going to take longer if you continue to let this toxic dirt just sit on the ground. Again, the volume that we're talking about, I mean, you guys have probably been there, but if you haven't, it's worth actually going out there. It looks like a tiny mountain of toxic dirt that has not been moved out of this community. You've got to solve that problem.
Lastly,
Yes,
just
please.
a follow up. So I've been down the creek a bunch, once a week,
Sure.
and I've never seen anybody there. Is there cleanup for where the creek is down there? The version of cleanup, meaning letting the rapids just take, solution to pollution is dilution.
Well, I'd be curious to sort of to follow up about where you're talking about, where you still have chemicals in the water.
Yeah. 2
and you
miles
don't
down
have
going into
cleanup. Because,
Negley.
like what I'm thinking is, for example, just actually if you head out directly right behind here, you have these sort of aeration that they're trying to use to try to get the chemicals out of the water. My understanding is that there should be things like that all across some of the contaminated waterways. If there aren't, that's a problem. That's something we need to follow up on too.
Okay.
Yeah. Sir.
I have a question. I think you called it aeration. Do you happen to know, because I can't really get an answer on what the theory is on how the aeration actually gets rid of the chemicals out of the creek?
No, I'm certainly not scientifically literate enough to guess how that works. My understanding is that certain of the chemicals are allegedly, when they're exposed to air, as opposed when they're sort of separated from the water, that will make it more likely that they burn off.
Well, that was
I don't know if that's true,
Yeah.
but that's certainly the claim that I've heard.
that was my and a lot of citizens' concerns, that you were taking chemicals from one form in the creek to putting them into the air, aerating. So I guess it's something we got to look into.
Ma'am.
I have a question about the dioxin and the
Sure.
testing. I live in Unity Township, which is surrounding this area,
Yep.
and I have a business in Darlington, which took a brunt of the fallout.
Sure.
People are they're terrified that they're walking and going to work every day, walking into the yards, and they're surrounded by dioxin dust.
Sure.
When can we, as citizens, get someone to come and test our soil?
Yes, ma'am.
I can't even get the EPA to come and test my water.
Sure.
They denied me.
Why did they deny you?
They said it was tested already, and this was after several phone conversations and a few emails. And I had talked to someone in the health department and said, we independently went and tested our well water, but the
And you
company.
own a private well, is that right, ma'am?
Correct.
Okay.
And we could not get the results for butyl acrylate and
Yep.
3 other of the chemicals because they are unable to test for that. They said the only people that can do that would go through the EPA directly. So I
Okay.
called the health department, they directed me to the EPA, and I got an email saying, your well has been tested already. So I don't know if they got wind that I independently tested it, but not for those toxic chemicals. So
Okay.
it's a lot of
So on the water testing question, ma'am, I'd ask you, so Brian right here, just on my staff, is right behind you. Give him your contact information so we can follow up there.
Thank you.
We want to make sure that people are able to get their water tested, not just now, but a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, if need be. So that's very concerning to me, and that's something that we should worry about. On the dioxin testing point, I mean, there are, I hate to say this, but if I can tick through a list of major failures here, and one of the failures, like I mentioned earlier, is the failure to clean up the disposal site. A second major failure is, I sent a letter to the EPA a couple of weeks ago asking them to test dioxins. It's pretty clear based on feedback that they're not doing that. And so that's just something I need to, we're going to have to keep on hounding them on. But really clearly, they need to be testing the dioxins. The fact that they're not is a major, major problem. And unfortunately, it sounds like, ma'am, they're not in your case.
Now back to acrolein. Acrolein can alter your DNA, release free radicals, interfere with glutathione, and its effects can be felt for up to 18 months in your lungs. It can also make you more susceptible to lung infections. Scientists do not even understand everything about acrolein exposure, but it can cause tearing, irritation to the eyes, lung damage, skin damage, and chemical burns. Acrolein may affect children different than it does adults. They just don't know. Either way, it does cause severe respiratory problems. If acrolein is in the air, it is advised to evacuate the area immediately. Children may be more vulnerable. Acrolein can burn the lips, the mucous membrane, and intestinal tract and cause severe diarrhea. Acrolein can also burn your esophagus and burn your stomach. Is this why, after 59 years of never having any stomach problems, this week I've had severe acid reflux so bad that it sends acid into my mouth and burns my throat and mouth. In my recent Newsmax interview, you can hear me coughing several times. That is acids coming up into my throat.
There's a woman named Pam Depp, and also Facebook, Off the Rails, East Palestine, so we can help. Excuse me.
If you know me, you know that I take absolutely no drugs. The pain in my mouth from my burnt tongue, the inside of my mouth, and the back of my throat hurt so bad from the acids that I am living on Tums, and I am taking Pepsid twice a day for 2 weeks to give my mouth and my throat time to heal. I have never had anything like this in my entire life. I blame myself for being so stupid. Even after going to the creek the very first time without a respirator, spending 45 minutes in filming, burning my nose, burning my throat, burning my chest, having an instant headache and diarrhea for 2 days, I was stupid enough to film again in this area at the entrance of the park. I stopped on the way home from work and got out of the car once I saw all the aerators. But really, who has to think about putting on a respirator in a town that you've lived in for 30 years? But this is our town's reality now. My throat is still severely burnt and it is raspy as I make this video. What about the children playing in the park? Those that are allowed. What about the children still living here? What about the asthmatics or the older folks having trouble breathing in the first place? What are these chemicals doing to them? Granted, there are people that can smoke their entire lives and never suffer any ill effects. There are also others who can smoke for a year and it may kill them 20 years later. We are not guinea pigs. We did not ask for this. We do not want it. The town does not deserve it. If you like this video, please press the like button. It's the only way now that the media and politicians are gone onto the next big thing that we can keep relevant.
You agree that it's a safe place to live?
Senator Graham, science is EPA's North Star, and we follow the science. And I drunk the water there. I drink it every time I go to town.
Okay.
Because the scientific data shows that it's safe.
Okay.
As does the air.
That's good. Ms. Vogel, you're from Ohio. Have you been there?
I've been in East Palestine since February 3rd with the exception of 5 days.